Joining us today is Dr. Susan Madsen, a renowned scholar, author, and global advocate for women's leadership and empowerment. As the founder of the Utah Women in Leadership Project, Dr. Madsen has spent her career amplifying data-driven solutions to elevate women and girls. Her research and advocacy have shaped policies, empowered communities, and sparked critical conversations about child abuse, gender equity, and social change. At Smart Talks, we believe that leadership is a form of activism, and Dr. Madsen's work exemplifies how informed voices can drive systemic change. We're so pleased to welcome her to the show.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Smart Talks. Today I am so excited. We have someone who I have so much respect for, who is just so knowledgeable and articulate and has worked tirelessly for the betterment of women and children and families. I mean, everywhere, but also specifically here in Utah. And so without further ado, I present to you Dr. Susan Madsen. Thank you so much for joining us.
It's so good to be here
today.
Thank you. It's great to be here and talking about topics that often make us uncomfortable, but the more we talk about them, I mean, that's the only way to get our rates down, to do better, is by talking about them. So I'm so grateful for your efforts, both of you, on this topic.
I mean, I couldn't agree more. Talking about them, learning about them, not just once and forgetting about it. It really does make all the difference. And so just starting off, I want people to recognize how incredible you are. If you wouldn't mind just sharing just a little bit about yourself to begin with, that would be so great.
Well, thank you. You're so kind. I have been working for a lot of years in the state of Utah, globally as well, on different issues around women's leadership, but really leaned into the work of Utah 16, 17 years ago. So it's been a while, and really started writing reports where really the Utah Women in Leadership Project is an organization I created, and really to get the research out there on various topics. I started with education and women's leadership and various things, but very quickly moved beyond that. Because when you understand a woman's identity, when you understand what impacts a woman's voice, her confidence, her impact in the home, her impact in society, in the workplace, every place, you know that there's so many other things that come together. And so when I really dug into the violence issue, especially domestic violence, sexual assault, and child sexual abuse, I started looking and researching into the connections between a woman's voice, confidence, all those things. And there's so much a connection between all of those pieces and the way that we bring ourselves to the whatever work we're bringing ourselves to. And so really the Utah Women in Leadership Project's main purpose, our mission, is to strengthen the impact of Utah girls and women. And we do that, number one, through research, and then research-based resources, and then as well events. And then started a little over a year and a half ago, I think you were at
I
the launch, Elizabeth, the Boulder Way Forward.
The reason was there.
Yes, the reason we started that is, as I looked for the first time at bringing, I used to do work at the United Nations and different spaces globally, and we looked at trajectories. Like, if we do things the rate we're doing things, how long will it be till we resolve or have equity and equality with women and men, or resolve issues? And even to make notable progress, when we looked at the data in Utah, it's 3 to 4 decades to just even start moving in these ways. And that wasn't good enough for me and so many other people in Utah. We need to make change faster, especially around these violence issues to girls and women. And of course, we know we know boys and men struggle in these areas too. I really work with the girls and women, and we know violence rates on girls and women are significantly higher. And so that's why we're just trying to, as we have about, I think, 4,000 to 5,000 people engaged now in the Boulder Way Forward all over in the state of Utah, 29 counties. So it's taken us a few years to get some momentum and get things organized. But our real effort is to make sure more girls and women thrive. And that has to be linked to the foundational element of greater safety and security, which violence is a real problem.
Mm-hmm. It really is, yeah.
Well, we are big fans of yours, your body of work, your career, the Women's Leadership Project, the work it's doing, and A Bolder Way Forward. And just as you and Elizabeth were mentioning as we kicked this off, it's so important that we talk about these topics so that we can reduce the stigma, the taboo-ness of this, so that people understand the prevalence, so that they know what to do, right? So that we can create a more compassionate society. There's so many reasons for us to talk about these, but I think for our listeners, what's really important to understand is why this is an issue that we need to talk about, and how prevalent the issue is. And you've spent so much of your career bringing forward research on these topics, on violence, on gender-based violence, on violence against women, domestic violence, intimate partner violence, child sexual abuse. So can you kick us off for our listeners just with a few statistics or research-based points about the prevalence?
Well, in terms of child sexual abuse, our report that we'll have out there soon will go through some different numbers. But generally speaking, we look at about 1 in 7 kids in the state of Utah will be sexually abused. And that's just sickening, isn't it? And the research tells us that probably 1 in 5 at least will be girls and young women. And so when we look at sexual assault as well, that is typically the research tells us that 1 in 3 will experience some kind of sexual violence, but 1 in 6 will be raped. And with those statistics, we learn that about 79% are below the age of 18. And so one other statistic that I cite often is when you look at, this is CDC data, when you look at 9th grade girls to 12th grade, so high school generally, CDC data a couple years ago said that 1 in 5 of our Utah high school young women say they've experienced sexual violence in the last 12 months. So those things are things that are just important for us to know. And we're trying to get that word out over and over that this is a problem. And it's not just in Utah, it's every place. However, things play out a little differently when you look at more conservative religious societies. And I'm using my voice more on that, not to shame anybody, but what we know from the research, if people aren't aware, they're not going to do anything. And every time I speak, like last week alone, I spoke 9 times. And every time I speak, I bring these things up. And I always have people from the audience that say, hundreds, I did not know this. I did not know this. And I'm like, first of all, start watching the news because it's there a lot, right? But secondly, you might feel uncomfortable, but the only way to move things is to get uncomfortable. And should I say, to start believing girls and women more. Absolutely. And in more conservative societies, you tend to not believe even more than other places, girls and women when they talk about any issue, but particularly violence. And that's a problem. Can I just say that? That's a huge problem.
Absolutely.
Oh, I agree. I mean, we've got a whole part of the foundation that focuses on encouraging belief in survivors. Like our whole "We Believe You" campaign is exactly just trying to support survivors and let survivors know that there are people who do believe them. I feel like following up though, just immediately after, like for the mothers and the aunts and or parents, fathers, uncles, grandparents, people who have young women in their lives who they care about, who are listening to this, I think their next sort of question would be, well, what can I do? Like, how do I talk about it with them? Where do we begin? What would your advice be?
Well, before I answer that, let me just say that research we collected in the state of Utah, and again, I think there's some similarities in other states, tell us that it's about neutral. When we asked, do you think child sexual abuse on this one is a problem in your community? And people are like, no, it's not really a problem, or I don't know. So that is something I want to emphasize. And what can people do? First of all, you need to be educated and aware of the issue. So it's, on the Boulder Way Forward website at boulderwayforward.org, there are 2-pagers with all of our what are called spokes, just simple statistics, simple information about what the research has told us about lifelong negative impacts of child sexual abuse, and then some different ones, but they're all overlapped for sexual assault and then intimate partner violence and domestic violence. So you don't have to be an expert. Just take a few minutes, look at the statistics, and then start sharing those and talking about those with your spouse or partner, with your family members. I know that's uncomfortable, but we have to do that. And there's a whole set of literature out there that talks about age-appropriate discussions with our children. Just saying, oh, it's inappropriate to talk to children about this and we'll take care of it as parents or whatever. Though what we know from the research is those conversations just don't happen a lot. And that leaves our children more vulnerable.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't make things worse to talk to them. It makes them more vulnerable. So that raising awareness with yourself and having discussions with other people is the first place to go. And there's so many resources. The Maloof Foundation, like you talked about, and the Elizabeth Smart Foundation, the SAPRIA, Prevent Child Abuse Utah. And if you're in another state, there's one of those in every single state. There's just resources out there. And what I really appreciate, there's becoming just kind of starting some researchers out there, research or helps, resources, I guess, out there on how to talk in religious settings. Specifically, I was just looking at one this morning, how to talk, how to help support people that have experienced abuse. So I happen to be Latter-day Saint from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and I was just looking at a resource on that website this morning where it says, listen, learn, believe. So some of the most simple things, understanding, awareness, just of looking at tips can change our behaviors immediately.
Which I think is like I love to hear that like the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is like emphasizing listen, learn, and believe, because I've just met so many survivors, I mean specifically here in Utah, that they were survivors of like sexual assault, of sexual abuse, but they didn't have the right words to put to it because nobody ever discussed the difference with them between like consenting intimacy versus sexual violence. And I think when you have that knowledge, then when you go in to speak to a spiritual leader, you can use the correct language. Because if you don't have the correct language, I mean, I've since met other survivors who are like, oh, I had disciplinary hearing, or like I was at school and I was sent to the honor code office and I got put on academic probation. And I'm always like, no, that's not right.
Well, this is I just want to say that even though my church has some resources, it is something that typically is not talked about in my religion. And I would say not just my religion. So more conservative and religious societies tend to struggle even more. In fact, there's a lot of evidence to show that in more religious and conservative societies, there's higher rates of abuse, of sexual abuse. You would think it would be the opposite, but it's not. And so it is a real challenge often in conservative religious societies to help make this a priority, because it is so uncomfortable for people to talk about. And we don't want to believe, as good people, that those things happen around us. And so we try and excuse them away. And so doing this kind of societal change within our culture here in the state of Utah is challenging, honestly. So I think there's some starts of resources in religious settings, but they're just starts. We need to unleash a whole bunch more work and awareness in leaders and families, and really kick people into gear. Can I just say that? To say, this is, in religious settings, I'm known to say, this is not acceptable to God.
Yeah.
Oh, I am with you 100%. And I think it's fine for people to practice their faith how they see fit. I think it's fine if people want to practice abstinence only. I don't have a problem with that. I just think if that's the stance you want to take, you also just need to clarify what is enthusiastic consent versus what is sexual assault, sexual abuse, what is rape. I think if you can really stress the difference between those two, if you're going to teach abstinence only, I think that might be the best way forward.
Absolutely. And I personally had, I don't know how many, 20, 30, 40, 50 women through the years tell me that they didn't understand what was happening to them in college. And they did not know they were actually being raped. They just did not understand. And then they, of course, knew bad things happen and blamed themselves. So you're both nodding, and I can tell you've heard those stories too. It's too many.
It is. It really is too many. It's really unacceptable.
Thank you for listening to Smart Talks. This is a quick break to say thank you to one of our sponsors. This season of Smart Talks with the Elizabeth Smart Foundation is sponsored by Minky Couture Blankets. At the Elizabeth Smart Foundation, we know the power of comfort and safety, and that's exactly what Minky brings into every home. Their blankets are luxurious, so soft, beautifully made, and designed to wrap you in warmth, because everyone deserves to feel secure. We're so grateful for Minky's support in our mission to end sexual violence and to empower survivors. Treat yourself or someone you love to the comfort of Minky and join us in supporting a safer world. Use code ESF, all caps, for 50% off your order today.
I'm I born and raised in Utah. I love Utah. I'm raising my family here in Utah. And I just think this is not good enough. Utah should be the example, not the bottom of the pile, which is where I feel like we're at right now. You'd probably know better than I do, but that's what I feel like.
Right. Well, we are in terms of women's equality. We are in terms of many things. I've got a whole list. What happens, however, and why that is all tied in, is when you have less women in leadership, which you tend to have less in conservative religious societies, when you have less women being in political roles and all of those issues related to social justice, safety, security, all these issues, domestic violence, child sexual abuse, do not get enough attention. They just are not emphasized. And so women, typically when there's more women in leadership, we do better on these issues, because we're hey, we're mothers, right? We are mothers, or we mother, even if we don't have our own children. We do that. And it's just not acceptable that we are putting keeping our kids in harm's way by just sticking our head in the sand in some ways. So I don't think we have a choice if we really care about girls and women in our lives, including my granddaughters, right? Including my neighbors and friends. We've got to more urgently lean in and do this work of raising awareness and decreasing our violence rates.
And I want to zone into what we were talking about with believing survivors, because I think awareness, education, and getting society to a place where it's acceptance that it's happening, right? They understand the prevalence. And the answer to that question that you asked is not, I don't know if it's happening in my community, right? Because people are so hesitant to believe it's happening in their backyard, but they think it can happen in other communities, right? So that, I think, is step one. But then step two is what we were just talking about with believing survivors, creating a place where survivors can go to trusted people in their lives, tell a story, and it's going to be the rule and not the exception of the rule that that person wholeheartedly believes their story and is there to support them, right? Because I think we know, I think from survivors that have come and talked to us that we've worked with at the foundation, many that you've mentioned, Dr. Madsen, but also research is telling us that one of the big barriers to reporting and why this issue is so underreported is they don't think someone will believe them. They're hesitant to come forward because they don't think that they'll be believed, or they think that it will be blamed on them as their fault. So that is so important. I want to underscore that, but I want to talk about these systemic barriers to reporting any type of violence, child abuse, domestic violence, intimate partner violence, sexual assault. So what strategies do you think we can implement to create a more supportive environment and just a safer society overall?
Great question. Big question.
Yeah.
First of all, one of the biggest things is to create public policies. And it's really interesting that, again, when there's more women in state legislatures or city councils or whatever, you're going to see more movement. And not every woman is the same, right? And we have less than women in political power. So many of these public policies just kind of go to the side and are not taken seriously. And there are some men in our legislature who are believers, and typically it's the men that have had spouses or daughters or terrible things, and that just shakes us up. But I'll tell you, there's a natural tendency for people not to believe girls and women, and public policy can help us with certain systemic issues. But in terms of changing the tide, turning the tide, we've got to do so much more than that. And public policy can't resolve everything, but systemically, that is, as I'm thinking about my state, and I know you reach more people than the state of Utah, we just need to do so much more. In fact, there are systemic kinds of issues or processes, I should say, that can be strengthened, put in place, for instance, in religious congregations, in church. That can make a big difference, especially here in the state of Utah. So we're not just thinking about protecting, but we're thinking first about children, about individual souls. And so when you talk about systemic, it's often government, it's often at federal, at state levels, but I still think we can use that systemic word to think about congregations and even some things in terms of a company, a for-profit company, let's say, because we have some companies coming on to a bolder way forward that are saying, we have these nice 2-pagers that can be given out. Let's have our employees take a few minutes and learn more about domestic violence or learn more about this. That can be a process or system of a company in general to raise awareness. So those are a few initial ideas, but I'll tell you, we're not having a lot of support right now still in our state for more policies that are going to really make a difference, not just for child sexual abuse, but our funding for both UCASA, our Utah Coalition Against Sexual Assault, and the Utah Domestic Violence Coalition had some key requests out there that were not like pie in the sky. They were basic, like let's do exams for strangulation, because we know the research, if a woman is strangled, the likelihood she will be killed is so high. And we just could not get the support. And to me, that just shows deeper, troublesome issues if we can't, if we're thinking, I'm going to be blunt here, if we're thinking more about the look of decreasing taxes for people, just a slight bit, than we are about increasing basic safety and security of our children and our women. There's just some priorities mixed up a little bit. And I laugh, but it makes me cry too. Can I just say that? Because we are just very, I mean, what we do and where we give money shows where our priorities are. And when we as a state say, come to Utah because we are so good to families, I'm like, yeah, recreation, yes. Few other things, right? But if we can't keep and make it a priority to have rape rates go down, child sexual abuse go down, are we really valuing families? That's my question.
In all your research, have you seen any movement in the rape rates and abuse rates? Are you seeing them go up? Are you seeing them go down at all?
Good question, because the data are really hard to find, and we're gathering from wherever, and a lot of them are state by state rankings and those things. So it takes a little bit of time, but in general, we know we're above the national average, especially with the data on child sexual abuse and sexual assault. Our rates of domestic violence look about equal. But again, there's research to say that in more conservative religious societies, you have less reporting. And so what we know on a national level, in many ways, our violence rates are going up. And that relates to movies, video games, just all kinds of, pornography is so much more widespread than it used to. And not that you can blame one thing above the other, but what we know is that it all impacts, the violence. And I do most of my work with girls and women, but I'm always saying we need boys and men. We need work with them, because a lot of this is because of boys and men. Not all.
Stop rape until rapists stop raping.
Yeah.
I mean, we can do a lot. We can talk about it. We can learn about it. We can educate it about it. We can make it a safe place for survivors to speak out. We can give skills and tools to minimize the chances of it happening. But ultimately, we cannot stop it until rapists stop raping.
Yeah, absolutely. And there are really things that can be done to, as parents with children. Sleepovers were the thing in the day, right? There's issues with that, and there's things, and as we know, 91% of child sexual abuse perpetrators are people that the kids know already.
Exactly.
And so
it's not this misnomer of stranger danger. We talk about that all the time. Like when we were,
my case
yours
is like
the unique.
The exemption, not the norm.
Yeah. And we talk about that all the time. I think when we were growing up as kids, it was stranger danger. It was stay away from the guy in the white van that has puppies or is giving out candy, right? But that is less than 10%, which again, not to, obviously yours is the exception to the rule, but that's less than 10%. Most of the time it's someone in that circle. It's someone that the child and the family knows. And I think that is a part of the reason for underreporting, not having the words. When we study, like with child sexual abuse, there's that link between it. If it's familial, for example, right? This is a person who's supposed to love and protect them and keep them safe. And that linking of love with the abuse, I think, creates so much confusion, not being able to have the words, not having a safe person to go to disclose, right? So that's why education is so important too.
And can I just say real quick, one thing just came to mind is that, man, do I hear so many people that their kids have been abused by someone they know. In one situation, a brother.
Yeah.
But then her parents and the siblings were so mad at her for
Yeah.
reporting. And that kind of, it's interesting. I wrote a piece recently, published it in Forbes, about sexual harassment specifically, but similar things, on why people, especially men, but why people more generally would defend a perpetrator
Mhm.
versus help a victim. It makes no sense to me why we wouldn't go straight. But there's this interesting, you'll have to maybe put it in the show notes, that piece,
Yeah.
because it is this wrestle that people have between the ethic of loyalty and
Mhm.
the ethic of caring. And for men specifically, loyalty to other men come out stronger. So I'm just trying to figure out, why do we think, yet none of this bad behavior relates in a conservative religious society to being more Christ-like, to having charity, all of those things that are taught in any religion, right? And any good principle, to have ethics. So there's this interesting thing that I'm wrestling with on why does this happen, but how can we change this? And it all starts again with awareness, that we have to do that. But then more than awareness, tools. And then you have to actually practice. You
Yeah.
have to practice talking to your children. You have to practice getting comfortable with those things. So sometimes, we just have awareness and we don't know how to still behave and how to talk to people and how to bring it in. So
Yes.
I'm a training and development expert, and that's one of those things that you help people practice, that actually role play.
Yeah.
I mean, that is just so fascinating. Like the loyalty piece. I mean,
I know.
Like, it's just like blowing my mind, because part of me is like, well, don't you have loyalty to humanity? Like, what about loyalty to this victim? Like, they were a victim. Like,
Yeah.
ugh,
It doesn't make sense. You'll have to read the little summary I wrote. It's fascinating to just help us get a grip on. I mean, you see this behavior, right, in the workplace, and bullying and sexual harassment, when people, if women report, they're pushed back. They're like, oh, I don't know.
I feel like you even see it, like in between, like if I feel like there's been a number of high profile cases, specifically here in Utah, where a father's been abusing the children.
Yeah.
And successfully prosecuted, but the mother refuses to acknowledge it, and she stays loyal to the husband. Like, it's just mind blowing.
Yeah, and most, well, I don't know about most, but a significant number of women in those situations, have experienced abuse for years. And oftentimes we talk about abuse only being physical, right? But sexual, but emotionally, financial abuse. I mean, there are women, too many, that have come to me, and especially after they've healed, have been able to talk through all the levels of abuse when they were made to feel like nothing, like they didn't matter, that nothing, that if they were, in fact, in one situation, the husband sadly tried to get his wife to commit suicide, telling her that she was nothing, that she was nothing more than the dust of the earth, and that people would benefit, including her children, if she was gone. That is, you can see, if you're messed up mentally, and it takes effort to work with these trauma issues. I have not personally had to experience that, but I have talked to enough women and read the research to just have such heartfelt compassion for people that go through that, and sometimes that happens to men too. So need to give grace, I think, to men and women, and boys and girls.
This layer of emotional and psychological abuse, financial abuse. I mean, I think that is 100% such a major reason why so many people don't report. I mean, how many kids' stories of abuse have you heard? Well, your mommy will go to jail if you tell anyone, or, you know, your parents, they won't love you, or like the fear of God is putting into the children if they ever say anything, or like the, you know, the abused wife, like, oh, you think you can survive without me? Like, how do you think you're going to survive? You're not smart. You're not capable. I mean, all of this, yes, psychological, financial, manipulative abuse. Absolutely. I 100% agree with everything that you've just said. It's like, they really go hand in hand. You almost can't have one without the other.
Agreed. And I think that's a key part of awareness too, not only like that paradigm shift against putting that on specifically, like in the examples that you were saying, the child, like, why are we putting on the child that a disclosure of violence against them or sexual assault will break up the family? No. The perpetrator and that act of violence is what broke up that family, because that's not a safe environment anymore. And so that is a huge paradigm shift that I think we need to make. But also on this financial and emotional abuse, I think just awareness and explaining what that is, and that is a form of abuse, and that falls under this. And I've recently seen some stories coming out in the media that have it's really warmed my heart to see, because they're referring to it as what it is. They're saying, I was in an abusive relationship. And instead of what I feel like has been typical, well, at least I wasn't hit, or he didn't hit me, or that being the only form of abuse that's acceptable to leave from or to refer to an abusive relationship as, they're saying, well, it was an emotionally abusive relationship, or he caught me he was the breadwinner, for example, in the family. And there was this monetary aspect tied to it. And I couldn't leave because financially I couldn't afford to live on my own. And that is a form of coercion, of this like cycle of power and control that we know is a part of intimate partner violence and abuse, right? And so I think those things are so key. And I've just been so pleased pleasantly to see people coming out telling stories about that, because with more of that, talking about it again, like we've mentioned before, talking more about that, I think people will begin to understand that is also a form, that counts, that is important, that is abuse as well. So I'm so glad that you both brought that up. That's key.
Yeah.
How do you feel like, I mean, we've discussed a lot of the problems around abuse, but how do you feel like we can best support our survivors going forward as a society? I mean, naturally, I'm going to say we should all start by believing, but outside of that, what more can we do?
Well, with that first comment, start by believing, we have had, that's a campaign that's international, and we have had a bit of that. Representative Romero here in the state started that a number of years ago, but it hasn't really kicked up. Most people don't know about that. So this year in 2025, that's going to really launch in the state of Utah, and hopefully in other states as well. And so that will raise awareness, give tools, those kinds of things as well. But as we talked about before, I think continued work around, raising awareness with individuals, but around the resources that are already there. So I think we need to support groups like yours, like Malou Foundation, Supriya, Prevent Child Abuse Utah, the Children's Justice Centers of Utah around the state, and others that are doing work. Some of those, so it's not good to jump out and start new nonprofits if you don't know the lay of the land.
Yeah.
And in terms of interventions with what we call them, doing more education in the elementary schools and so forth. There are groups, nonprofits already there doing that. We just need to make sure and support them, raise the awareness of their resources, and move that forward. But I think, again, Elizabeth, to your comment earlier about religious and our conversation about religious, I think religions can do more, but they need to know, they need to have their leadership trained at all levels, from congregations to, at all levels trained. And then continued work in terms of leaders and parents and so forth. This needs to be tackled at all levels, down to congregations, down to communities, down to cities and towns, right? Mm-hmm. If cities and towns would, and they're responsible for law enforcement, all of those kinds of things. Mm-hmm. So it's part of their purview, right? To say, mm-hmm. let's actually give tools out there. We haven't had that, but that's part of what Boulder Way Forward is wanting to do at all of those levels. Mm-hmm. So I think there's a lot of work that can be done. I will tell you this, sometimes in the conversations, they're like, let's actually just raise awareness this year. Let's do this or that. I think we have to lean in with all our might, raise awareness, give them tools, do it all at the same time. Because every year we don't take this more seriously is a year that we will see hundreds, if not thousands, of more children, women abused, and in some cases, especially, higher profile cases in the state of Utah, actually more women and children killed. I mean, if we don't get these numbers down soon. So this is, I'm a little off our question there, but had to lean in to say that.
No, it's great. I agree with you. I mean, we obviously both agree that it's at all levels. There has to be federal change and nation change, worldwide change, right? And we have to change and prioritize this on a US and federal government level. And then we've talked a lot about the state of Utah and all the way down to communities, neighborhoods, churches, congregations, right?
I mean, families,
yeah, all the way down. But I think it would be so interesting to kind of hear what would be your dream kind of policy platform that you would bring forward. What are some of the big policy changes you think we can make that are achievable that could really begin to get those rates down? Because of course, awareness is key. Education is key, right? We've talked about that. And every individual has a role in this fight to play regardless. But what would you like to see specifically on a policy agenda?
On policy, I would like to, it's taken a while to even get the funding released for programs in elementary schools to raise awareness. The Policy Project here in the state of Utah and other groups did a lot of work. It hasn't really launched yet. I don't know why it is just like that, but that's just a start. I think we have to have this similar things in junior high and middle school and high school, and more resources in college, at college levels. And so, there's also different policies related to law enforcement. Mm-hmm. Not only, some policies relate to providing funding or different resources to train more people, law enforcement professionals on that. I just think, and it is, my mind right now is still in the awareness phase, but that moves into more than awareness, but giving people awareness and then skills.
Yeah.
So how do you how do you actually do better at believing children, at believing there's actually, you can learn to be better listeners. You can learn about what the mind does, our unconscious stuff that is happening. And then you can practice and have better behaviors. So for me, I'll tell you those kinds of things. And I'm not an expert on child sexual abuse. I'm just in there and doing research and doing the best that I can. But the things I could just give you a lot more, and we don't have time, in the sexual assault and the domestic violence range. We need to do the basics. Let's make sure our helplines are there. That's the basic. Just helplines are covered. And forensic exams. There's individual people that keep having to round up the funding. And then the strangulation exams from this. Those are basic rights, human rights of living in, the United States that we should have, and within the state of Utah. And so those are all related to public policy. And then, beyond that, of course, there's many other things, but those are the things that come to mind as some top priorities here in the state.
I love that. Well, I would just want to close by again saying thank you so much for joining us today. Like, I just enjoy listening to you. I enjoy speaking with you. I mean, you're just so knowledgeable and you just have so much data to share. I mean, it's just, I want to say fascinating, but at the same time, I want to say like heartbreaking and disappointing.
Yeah.
But I want to say thank you so much for your time and so graciously giving it to us. You've just been such a wonderful guest today. So thank you so much.
I do want to say one more thing, and that is the reason I continue to do this work is for the word hope. You are both in this because we hope. And we know things can get better if enough people lean in and do the work. And so that's the call to us, right? Is to have some people working in this and hopefully next year more. And then parents will come on board. And in the end, we'll protect home and family. We'll do better at protecting our children. And we'll help them heal and us heal if things have been awry. So thank you for the work that you do, Elizabeth. Thank you, both of you, actually, for all the work that you do at your foundation and for the support that you give to this state and beyond.
Well, thank you. I feel like the three of us could sit and talk for hours about these issues, but I agree. We are both here because we hope for a better tomorrow. We hope for a better, more compassionate society to support survivors. We hope for better support for survivors and access to services. And when people ask it, like, that's what keeps us going and doing this work. And I know it's the same for you. So thank you for your passion and for the role that you play and for reminding us how important data and research are, because that's one of the things that I take every time I hear you. It underscores the importance of really making data-driven decisions, right? Data-driven decisions in policy and in the behavior change that we want to see. And in some of those solutions to creating a safer community for women and children. So thank you.
Yes. And to our listeners, don't let this be the end. Make sure you check the show notes for all the attached information and documents we will have. To women out there, if you're considering going into leadership, this is your sign that is correct. We need you representing us and helping our communities and cities and states move in a better direction. Let's see the numbers and statistics change. And again, just don't let this be the end of the conversation.
Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you.
That's it for today's episode of Smart Talks, brought to you by the Elizabeth Smart Foundation. Thanks for joining us as we dive into these important conversations about creating a safer, more compassionate world. We hope that what you've heard challenges you to think deeply, feel more compassionately, and see the world through the powerful lens of a survivor's truth. If today's episode resonated with you, or if you know someone who would benefit from hearing this, please share it with them and consider subscribing. And leave us a review wherever you're listening. We'd love to hear from you. Connect with us on social media. You'll find us on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn. This podcast is made possible by listeners like you. If you would like to support, you can make a one-time or recurring donation of any amount at elizabethsmartfoundation.org/donate. You can also find more resources and ways to get involved on our website. Thank you for listening and being a part of a community that listens, believes, and works together to create a future where no one has to suffer in silence.